I don't know why I am beginning to like my sister's husband, but I must get him.
If someone told Sandra that her only sister would do this to her, she won't believe. It all began the day Precious moved in with Sandra and her husband. She was posted to serve at Ebony as a youth corper, but she had not secured an apartment yet, so Sandra begged her husband that her sister stays at their place for some time, as she looks for her own apartment. The first 2 weeks passed, everywhere was calm and peaceful, but from the third week, things began to change. Precious started wearing skimpy dresses around her sister's husband, Greg. Each time she passed him, she gave him a look that did not seem ordinary. Sometimes, she purposely dropped an item, just to bend, and let Greg notice her graceful figure, and of course she had it all, and Greg was beginning to pay attention to them. Sandra first noticed the little things, Precious lingering in the living room when Greg watched football, laughing too hard at his jokes, brushing against him by mistake. Sandra dismissed it as harmless sisterly comfort. But the skimpy clothes kept coming, crop tops, tiny shorts, sheer nightgowns worn whenever Dan was home. One Saturday, Sandra returned early from the market and found Precious in the kitchen wearing Greg's oversized grey t-shirt. "Mine got stained," she said sweetly. Greg sat at the table, phone in hand, his frozen tongue betraying that he had noticed long before Sandra arrived. That night, Sandra tried to raise the issue. Greg brushed it off, tired, nothing more. But when the lights went out, Sandra lay awake, listening to slow footsteps outside their door, a pause, then the soft click of Precious's room closing. The tension grew heavier. Precious began cooking Greg's favorite meals, pepper soup, pounded yam with egusi, dishes Sandra no longer had time to make. Greg praised the food loudly, and Precious would blush, murmuring anything for family. Each word twisted Sandra's stomach. Sandra started coming home earlier and watching closely. Precious now sat beside Greg, not across from him. Their thighs brushed. Greg didn't move away. One evening, Sandra walked in to find them laughing over Greg's phone, their heads close, Precious's hand resting on his knee a moment too long. That night, Sandra confronted her in the kitchen. Precious denied everything, then smiled coldly. "Maybe you should start acting like his wife again." In that moment, Sandra saw her sister clearly, not as the girl she'd raised, but as a woman who wanted what she had. The house turned cold with silence and stolen looks. Sandra stopped leaving them alone, changed her routines, even worked from home. Precious never crossed the line openly, just enough to make Sandra doubt herself. One night, Sandra had a late meeting but returned early without calling. She entered quietly through the back gate and froze in the corridor. The lights were low. Soft music played, Greg's favorite. Precious sat close to him on the couch, whispering. His hand rested on her thigh. Then she leaned in and kissed him. Greg didn't pull away. Sandra clung to the wall, numb, watching her husband and sister together. When Precious finally looked toward the corridor and smiled knowingly, Sandra turned and left. She sat in her car for an hour, crying silently, then checked into a cheap hotel nearby and wept until nothing was left. The next morning, Sandra returned home, calm, unnervingly so. Greg acted normal in the kitchen. Precious stayed in her room. Sandra greeted them, kissed Greg's cheek, claimed an early meeting, then quietly packed a small bag with her documents, jewelry, and the spare key to her late mother's house in 𝐄𝐥'𝐬. She left without a note. For days, calls flooded in. Greg, Precious, friends. She ignored them all. On the fourth day, she sent Greg one message: "I saw everything. Don't look for me. I'm filing for divorce. Enjoy the house with her." Then she blocked them. 6 months later, Sandra was in 𝐄𝐥'𝐬, running a small boutique. She looked different, stronger, quieter. She never spoke of the betrayal. But she understood now, some betrayals are planned. Sandra never went back to Port Harcourt. She never spoke to her sister again. But every Christmas, a card arrived at her boutique, unsigned, postmarked Ebony. Inside was always the same thing, one line written in Precious's neat handwriting. Merry Christmas, Big Sis. I miss you. Sandra read it, then dropped the card into the trash. Follow this page, like, share, and come back on Monday for another story.